So, hi everyone. My name is Janet, as mentioned, and I'm the founder of Ascribe Culture, which is a platform and a community supporting entrepreneurial women to be empowered by faith. And I'm really, really excited to be joining you here today. Thank you to the entire team at Stronger Network for inviting me to speak on this topic of 5 lessons that I've learned since growing an online community. Now, we started quite a few years ago, and there's been a lot of change in terms of the cultural changes, the online changes. We've gone through a pandemic. And so there's been a few things that we've learned in the time. And there's a few things that I'm hoping that as I share it with you, as you start or grow your community, you're able to also apply it as you lead. Now, I thought I would start off by just talking a little bit about community and what a community is and why it's even important. And so a community is a group of individuals that share a common goal, share a common value, and share a common belief. And the reason why I found it so useful for us as a platform is that we found there's a number of women, entrepreneurs, creatives, freelancers who just find that having a community helps them to stay the course. It can get quite lonely and it can get quite overwhelming when you're working towards a vision that God has given to you, but having a community online and offline helps you to keep running your race. So Ascribe was started with a vision to see entrepreneurial women empowered by faith. And that means empowered to overcome any challenges, any obstacles, to live for Jesus and to build their brand and vision and make an impact in their industries. And so what I'm going to be sharing is what's worked for us, but use whatever tools, techniques, strategies that I mention in a way that is befitting to your community. So the first thing that I learned is that it's so important to lead with conviction. Now, conviction is a strong belief in what you're doing. And for me, it took a while, but it took me to the place of prayer where I had to go to God and ask him, really and truthfully, what is it that you want me to do in terms of the gifts and the passions that you've given to me? And when he opened my eyes to this particular community of women, entrepreneurs, he began to reveal things to me in a way that enabled me to start taking action. And I found that having conviction has helped me to overcome challenges because it can get quite distracting, it can get quite overwhelming, especially in the online space, but having that conviction has helped me to keep going. Now, there's 2 layers to conviction that I wanted to share. The first is that you need to have conviction that God has called you. Sometimes when God lays a vision on our heart to build a community or to grow a community, we can start to doubt ourselves and question, is this really what God wants me to do? And so having that conviction that God has called you and he's going to equip you to lead that community is extremely key. The second layer of conviction is having conviction about the mission that God has called you to. So, for example, with us, Ascribe, our mission is to see entrepreneurs empowered by faith. And so that means that if other things come along the way, because of our conviction, we're grounded in that mission that we're supposed to be working towards. And so conviction can also help us to stay focused. Now, online is not a very quiet place. It's actually quite noisy. There's a lot of things going on, quite a lot of distractions. And sometimes you can start comparing yourself, looking at what someone else is doing, looking at the strategies that they're adopting, seeing how fast they're growing. But when you have that conviction, it helps you to remember that God is directing you on your path, that there's something unique that he's called you to do for your community. And so I just want to encourage you that if you've got conviction, make sure that you use this to stay grounded. And if you haven't, go back to God and say, God, what is it that you want me to do? Who are the people that you're calling me to serve? And allow this to stir you in the right direction. Now, being in community doesn't mean that everything's going to come easily. Growth requires time. And in that process, it's extremely important that even if you do feel as though things aren't happening as smoothly or happening as seamlessly, that you go back to God in prayer, not just at the start of the journey, but also along the way. As I mentioned, Ascribe's been going for a number of years, and I've learned that along the way, we've had to always go back to God in prayer. We've had to also go back to him and ask for new revelations as things have shifted. Now, the digital space has grown a lot. there's a lot more platforms that are available to us. There's a lot more tools that we can utilize as well. But when you have a conviction, it means that you're grounded by it, but you're not constrained by it. And so being adaptable and allowing the Holy Spirit to lead us into new spaces, onto new platforms, has enabled us to stay close to the mission and stay aligned to what God has called us to do. Now, a verse that helps me, because there are times when it can become a bit overwhelming and exhausting, is Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. And it says, "Do not grow weary in well-doing, for you will reap a harvest if you do not give up." Now, this leads me on to the second point, which is commitment. It's all well and good having a conviction and knowing what God's called you to do, knowing that he's equipped you, but you need to be committed to serving that community. Now, commitment can look very different in different seasons, but ultimately commitment is really about being consistent, showing up consistently to serve your community. Now, this could include prioritizing time to pray frequently, whether that's daily or weekly, taking out time every month or quarterly to plan and to really assess how things are going with the community, and then also making time to actually take action. Now, when you're committed to the work that God has laid on your heart, when you're committed to serving the community, it means that you might have to make some sacrifices, that there's a lot of energy and time that you're going to have to pour into that community. But because of the vision and the conviction that you carry, you're willing to make those commitments. Now, being committed also means that although you're consistent, there's a level of consistency that you will exercise online, but there's also a level of consistency that you'll exercise behind the scenes. So showing up for your community is great, but also as an individual, you have to be committed to the voice of God. You have to be committed to listening to what God is actually saying to you. You have to be committed to being obedient to his instructions, even if they don't make sense from the onset, and even if they don't make sense in comparison to what you're seeing other people doing. So for example, God might say that in a particular season that you should pause a little and not do as much online activity. And maybe you might be thinking, oh, well, that means that we're going to get forgotten or the community won't be as visible. But staying close to God, because he has the strategies that are vital for where he's taking you to, means that you're going to be in a greater position down the line. So being committed to the community is great, and being committed to showing up for the community is great, but also be committed to your relationship with God. Be committed to what he's calling you to do as an individual and also as a community. Now, over the pandemic, I'll be very honest, things began to change quite quickly and everything became quite digital. And although we wasn't using a lot of digital tools at the time, we had to adapt quite quickly. And this meant that although things changed, and I'm sure it's happened to a lot of us, although a lot of things changed, we had to evolve with the community. And this meant that we had to do events online, we had to be more present in terms of our social media platforms, and we had to introduce new ways to connect as well. And so we launched our podcast. And so this was another layer of commitment that meant that although things had changed, because we was committed to the overall vision, we was willing to put in the work to ensure that we stayed connected to our communities. So think about the ways that you're being committed to the community that God has laid on your heart. Are there any other things that you can be doing that might help you to ensure that you're staying connected to them? And is there things that you need to be doing in terms of your relationship with God to ensure that you're committed to growing as a leader so that you can grow the community that he's placed on your hands? Now, when we're committed to God, it means that there are things that possibly are happening around us that we might want to jump on that bandwagon, or we might feel as though there's things that we should alter in terms of what we're doing. But I just want to encourage you to keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. And I remember a verse, I believe it's in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1-2, and it speaks about keeping your eyes fixed on Jesus so that you can run your race. Now, being committed to your own race requires you to keep your eyes focused on Jesus. And so in order for us to be committed, because it's not an easy process, because there will be a lot of bumps along the way, and there might be challenges that you just don't expect, it's so crucial that you keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Now, the third point that I want to talk about in terms of how, we've grown an online community, the lessons we've learned, is the importance of content creation. So you can't really exist in the digital space without content, and more importantly, valuable content. Now, producing content, developing content strategies is so crucial to ensure that the things that you're putting out, the messages that you're communicating to your community aligns with that overarching mission that I mentioned at the start. So again, for Ascribe, it's to see entrepreneurial women empowered by faith. And so what does that mean? That means that a lot of the content that we produce helps us to ensure that we're supporting entrepreneurs to be empowered through the word of God. So that's Bible scriptures, that's prayers that we might be sharing, that's conversations about the reality of being a Christian in today's culture whilst growing a brand or a business. And so content creation stems from your overarching vision and your mission. And what we found to have worked is the fact that when we have time to plan and we sit down and we brainstorm, we always ensure that our content points back to our mission. And so there's two things that I want to talk about in terms of content strategy and also having a content calendar. Now, when it comes to having a content strategy, there's various things that you can consider that will help to grow your community. So we use a lot of content for Instagram because we found that this is a channel that works for us. But when you're developing your content strategy, you want to think about, where does the community hang out? Where do they spend the most amount of time online? Is it Instagram? Is it TikTok? Is it YouTube? Is it Twitter? When you start to understand who God's called you to and where they're hanging out, it's easier for you to show up in those spaces, and it's easier for you to find ways to grow in those spaces. So with Instagram, for example, there's quite a lot of features that we're able to use. So whether that's posts, Instagram stories, Instagram reels, there's different ways that we can develop content to ensure that we're connecting with our community, but also attracting new individuals into the community through our content. And so what are the forms of content that we use? We use graphics, we use Bible verses and scriptures, we use video content where either we're actually speaking live and direct to our audience, whether that's through Instagram stories or posts that we've recorded and uploaded, or we curate content that aligns with the vision and with the messaging that we want to be putting out. And so another way to grow is to ensure that you're on the right platforms, you're showing up in diverse ways through posts, through videos. We know that videos is definitely something that a lot of people are engaging with, and just creating content that you know is relevant to your community. Now, when you're developing your content strategy, it will require quite a lot of research. You need to understand the trends and the tactics that work for your audience. As mentioned, we support entrepreneurial women. So we have to understand the challenges that they might be facing, whether that's anxiety, whether that's fear, whether that's comparison. And we need to ensure that our content speaks to each of those challenges. So we might use a Bible verse, for example, that speaks about fear. God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And this could just be a way to encourage someone in their day. Or we might have a conversation about not needing to conform to the patterns of this world. We had a podcast episode where we interviewed a fashion entrepreneur, and she was speaking to us about some of the pressures that she's experienced in working in the fashion scene, for example. And so it's so important to ensure that you understand the challenges that your community are facing, and then find ways to actually create and develop content that can speak to those challenges. Another thing to bear in mind is to think about their ambitions, think about their aspirations. What are they trying to achieve? Where do they want to be in life? And also speak into those areas as well, so that there's a balance. The thing that community thrives on is belonging and being inclusive. And so people want to feel like they belong to this community because you understand what their needs are and what their aspirations are. So the more research you can do to understand the problems and, the aspirations that your community is going through, the easier it is for you to grow your online community. Now, in terms of content calendar or content scheduling, digital is always on, it's 24/7. It doesn't switch off. And so it's important that you create boundaries and you have schedules in place to ensure that you're actually creating time for yourself and that you're working in a very organized and focused way. Now, for us, we post on our social platforms about 3 to 4 times a week. We also, when we had the podcast running, it was going out every single week. And then we had a monthly newsletter that was going out every single month. And so this schedule meant that we could manage our own expectations as a team and also deliver to our community in ways that would ensure that we're staying connected. And so in order to grow your community and avoid burnout and overwhelm, I would encourage you to ensure that you have a content calendar and schedule that enables you to ensure that you're organized and you're focused on delivering the best content that's possible. Now, a few tools that I would probably share that we've been using in terms of our content would be Canva. Canva is an online tool. It's an app that you can get and download onto your phone. You can also use it on your laptop, on desktop as well, and it enables you to create graphics quite easily. It's very user-friendly. It's for beginners. You don't need any prior experience. And we use this quite a lot to create graphics and posts for Instagram, to create visuals for our podcasts, and also to create audios and visuals such as video content as well. So I'll definitely recommend Canva. They have a free subscription, and you can also enhance your subscription if you need additional features and pay for that monthly. We also use Planoly and Hootsuite. This helps us to actually schedule the content so that we can actually see over the course of the week or the month what we're planning to post in advance. And we use Google. Google's great, especially Google Docs, if we're sharing documents across the team. It just helps us to ensure that everything is saved and secure in one place. So when it comes to content, please do try and develop content strategy. It's helped us to stay aligned to our vision and our mission. It's helped us to stay focused on what the community needs, and also develop a content schedule, as this will help you to remain organized and avoid burnout. And the last thing that I'll say around content creation is to review your content. Now, data is so key, and it's so great that we can actually check our analytics and see what's working and what's not working. And this helps us to ensure that the content that we're actually putting out there, that we're spending our time to produce, is actually valuable and it's helping to grow the community. So if you're looking to grow your community, look at ways to track what's going well and what's not going so well. On Instagram, there's tools that you can use to see what posts are performing well, where are people engaging, what can you continue doing, and how can you start to pivot. Another thing to also mention as well is when it comes to content, it's important to look and see what else is working in your industry and in other industries as well. It's okay to be inspired by other people's content without needing to copy it. Inspiration is great because it fuels your own creativity, but also ensure that you're staying aligned to your vision and you're doing what works best for your community. Now, point number 4 is about care and connection. It's great to produce content, to publish content, and to even promote your content. But what's most important is to connect with the community, to engage, and to ensure that they feel seen and heard. Now, I learned this quite quickly because I felt as though people behind the screens are actually individuals. They're not just followers, they're not just subscribers, they're individuals with needs. And so a few ways that we stay connected with our community beyond just posting content is asking them questions. For example, on Instagram story, we put out polls, we try and get them involved in the topics that we're discussing. If anyone leaves a comment on one of our posts, we reply back to it so that they feel as though we notice them. And growing a community online, it's very important because we don't have that physical connection that we try and find ways to actually interact with them through digital tools. So it's so important, if you can, where you can, to communicate, to connect, and to actually show that you care when it comes to growing your community. Now, a way to create an inclusive community, again, is to ask questions, to ask for feedback, to try and incorporate some of their ideas and their viewpoints into your content. This will just help them to see that you're noticing them and that you care. Speak their language. Find terms or words that they can associate with as well. Speak in the way that they would speak. We see this example with Jesus when he was actually speaking, and he was saying parables. He will say it in their language first before saying it in a way that would actually harness the point he was making. And so make sure that you step into their world and you understand how things can apply in their context, so that you don't confuse them and so that you can carry them along with your message. And the final thing is help them connect with each other. If you have events, even online, you can create breakout rooms, and this helps them to actually connect within the community. It helps them to build relationships and to sharpen one another as well. Now, the fifth thing that I want to talk about is collaboration. And this has really helped us to grow our community. And collaboration works in two ways. Collaboration in terms of reaching out to other people who have a similar vision or values to you can also help you to reach new audiences and reach new individuals in their community. So when we have events, we invite guest speakers like I'm here today. And that means that they will share it to their community, and that just helps you to grow as a whole. Also, with our podcast, we interview guests who also come on and they share that with their community as well. So if you have a community, think of ways that you can, reach out to people whose visions and values align with your community, and see how you can collaborate on projects, collaborate on events, because this will help you to also grow your community, and also look for ways that you can speak with them as well. So I hope that these tips have been helpful. One thing to bear in mind when it comes to growing your community is that it's a process, it's gradual, and so it will take time. But as I mentioned, do not grow weary in well-doing, because the harvest will certainly come. Thank you for having me. If you want to stay connected with Ascribe, you can reach out to us via Instagram, which our handle is Ascribe Culture. You can connect with us on our website, www.ascribeculture.com. And you can listen to our podcast on Apple and Spotify by searching for the Ascribe podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. You've just done my job for me. I really appreciated you coming on and sharing your 5 C's on how we stay connected. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.